So the format of today's session is we're going to have some presentations, and then towards the end of the session we will have a Q&A. If you would like to submit a question for the Q&A at any point during the webinar, you can do that via the Q&A function. So not the usual chat function in Teams. You should have a Q&A button, and that is where you need to submit your questions. There was also the opportunity to submit questions in advance of the session. So when we get to the Q&A section, we'll be going through those pre-submitted questions as well as the questions that are submitted at any point during the session. There will also be the opportunity to ask your questions verbally, but we won't be picking up questions directly in the chat. All questions will be answered within the Q&A section, and any questions that we don't get to, we will follow up with a response to after the session. And it's just a reminder, please don't post anything that's commercially sensitive. All attendees will see any questions that are posted, and please avoid asking scheme-specific questions. So in terms of who we have on the webinar today, so from Northern Powergrid, we're going to be hearing from Paul Glendinning, Director of Energy Systems, who I'm going to hand over to in a moment, and also Jim Cardwell, Head of Energy Systems Policy, who will be sharing some updates with you all. We also have other Northern Powergrid colleagues to contribute to the Q&A section. So we've got Luke Scott, Customer Manager, Martin Hardwick, Commercial Manager, Brad Jobson, Commercial Manager, and Elliot Dixon, Major Connections Engineer. We also welcome Will Kirk-Wilson from NESO with us. Will's going to give us an update later on in the presentation, and will also be present for the Q&A section to respond to any questions that you have. Okay, and I will end housekeeping there and hand over to Paul to get us started. Thanks, Paul.
Okay, thanks very much, Becca, and many thanks to everybody who's joined this webinar today. We can tell that from the quantity of sign-ups that this is a very important moment in all of our customers' 2025 year and into 2025-6, and it's very important for us to work with you all to communicate our plans and explain to you how we're going to go forward. So we've got an NPG update for about half an hour, and we've got will speak from NESO at the end of Jim's update, and then we'll go into a Q&A. And as Becca said, it'd be great if people have questions, particularly around the process and the methodologies, rather than individual scheme questions. I think it's really important, and we'll talk a little bit about how we intend to communicate with you all as we go forward in 2025. Go to the next slide, please, Becca. So in summary today, what we want to discuss and land with you all is the position that we are currently in, which is the safety catches off. Everybody on this call will have read the Ofgem approval decision, clear responsibilities for everybody, and we were fairly pleased with the responses that Ofgem's given, and all of our plans are intact, and the work that we've done in the 6 months leading up to the decision is excellent work, all done, ready to roll. So we're in really good space for that. Clearly, there are some final updates to methodology, so working hand to hand with NESO to get the methodologies and the timetable absolutely clear, which we'll be communicating in the rest of the 2025 year. We are, as I said before, really aware that our communications and our engagement with you all is going to be vital to the experience that we all experience going through 2025. And we've calculated that we probably have around 5,000 communication points. So we're going to do that through a blend, and we'll come on to that with a detailed slide of how we're approaching that. And we would like your views on that as well. So as I said, our implementation plans are going really well. We've got plans in place and we've got suitable resources deployed. We are going to focus on the existing 430 projects held up in the whole queue to get to Story with transmission access. And in essence, that will be the older transmission offers and 150 of the more recent ones that came through. In effect, we believe that we've got our data now cleansed complete. We know the status of all of the projects. We've contacted every developer that's out there, and just to sort of let you know, we've already managed to clear 77 projects by working in the last few months, going through with customers about their intentions. So we're monitoring those milestones. Our next big step is to launch a new portal that will be on our website, which will get the customer evidence that you all know that's going to be required, that we'll collect and then submit through to NISO after we've validated it and checked it through. That's going to go live mid-May. Really, really important, that point, and we will be communicating that out to you all. We've got the contact details of all the developers involved in the process correct and up to date, we believe. So if there's any transactions that's happened in the last couple of weeks, then please get in touch with us as soon as possible. And then, of course, there is talk of the first enduring window, which will be at the back end of 2025. And we have 100 projects to go for the first enduring window, particularly encouraging onshore wind applications, because as you will all know, the developer community will know where we're over and where we're under in terms of the headroom that we've been allowed in our regional capacity allowances. Really, really important to look at that. And as part of our comms going forward, we'll be talking about speeding up the connections of some people in the 430, and also looking to speed up onshore wind connections to take headroom that's going to be made vacant by the battery storage projects that will be dropping out of the queue this year. So one of the things I wanted to highlight is that last year at this time I said that we would be building and constructing projects, and the accelerated technical limits projects and suitable reinforcement that we know is going to be needed, we've committed to building, and we're underway with those projects, because what we want to do is to be on top of the speed up piece. So if we can do anything for a project that's going ahead to get transformers or cable, etc., project managers organised, then we will be doing. Can we have the next slide, please, Becca? So in terms of the agenda, if I just run from left to right, there's the Ofgem key decisions and the key messages coming from that. There's a big point for us to talk about our communication plan for 2025, which is frequent and timely to fit with the requirements of the year. We will talk through in this presentation today how we're going to handle the existing projects and that customer portal and how that will all work. And then we'll also have a nod to, we know that projects that were accepted recently, they'll be getting ready for the enduring gate 2, the first one at the end of the year. And we'll make sure that we've got all the data we need, that high quality data that's in there, to make sure that they speed through the system as well. And of course that network build ramping up and getting actually construction happening on our network, which is what we all want to see. Next slide, please. So I thought it would be useful just to run through the Ofgem decision, and I think everybody on this call will have read it. There's a lot of words on that screen. I don't intend, in the way of saving time, to read every word out there, but just pick up the key changes, the key points, and I think a really good line for the increased protection for people who have existing agreements for connection by the 31st of December 2027 will retain their connection dates, and they will be sped through the system. And of course, projects that submitted planning by the 20th of December 24 and achieve consent will be eligible for a gate 2 offer as well, and that's really quite important. There was a point made about solar and solar allocations, And I think anybody with a solar project out there will be up to speed with this, but they've merged the transmission and distribution zones because of the way in which that market was lining up. It didn't do particularly well for solar developers, so they've decided to merge those zones. That gives us a bit more work to be done. And of course, I doubt there'll be very many long duration energy storage projects on our network at the moment, but it's been clearly defined what the differences of those will be. Quite interesting as well. The second one off the bottom there, if people haven't picked that up, the famous Wacom 2, which has really required DNOs to have a tight process in place to get the initial info to NESO 5 days after the window closes, and then all data submission complete within 10 days. So we'll put a plan in place to make sure that Northern Powergrid hit that and sort that through. And then final point from me really is that there's no pause after the queue formation because we're trying to speed everything up. So we were very keen to ask Ofgem not to include further pauses as we go forward. So that's the key plans. I would say they're all in place. As I said before, they're lined up with our plans. We have a little bit more to do methodologies wise on Wacom 2 and on the solar side that we're working through now. But I have no doubt that those are quite straightforward areas to manage through. So if we go to the next slide, please. I've worked really hard with the team and our comms team to make sure that we satisfy all of the requirements and that nobody's sitting out there with not being talked to or have the chance to have discussions. And particularly I want to draw everybody's attention to the explainers. So what we decided to do is we get a lot of comments about too high level, too detailed, more detailed, less detailed. So it's clearly horses for courses. So we'll continue with routine webinars, and you'll see this is the April one in the middle there with the red line, and we're expecting to do an update in July. But then, of course, what we want to run is the explainers that go into the real detail for the people on this call that want to really go through how it's going to operate and how it's going to work. We want that detailed webinar to explain it. And of course, a number of other touch points that go through, but it's I'm very keen to hear from anybody out there that has either further ideas or can endorse what we're trying to do here, or if there are other explainers that are missing away from. We've already done one on readiness criteria that was very well attended and went through in detail what data would be required. Then we're going to run another one on protections and hybrids. There's been a lot of questions about hybrids, so we want to be very clear with people how those are going to be dealt with. And then that initial and detailed checks one into June, and then of course the 1 to 5 megawatt threshold story in July, etc. I'm not going to read them all out, but what I'm keen on is if there's anybody out there that sees or thinks of an explainer that they would like us to put on, then please let us know. And that this is the route that we're going to run for the rest of the year. Of course, there'll be times for people to talk to us with direct questions, and we'll get back to people. But in terms of how we want to handle the explainers, we don't want to run the hybrids one, for example, with every hybrid customer that's out there. We'd like them to gather together and go as a group. So I'll pass to Becca. That's the opening part gone, and I would particularly like some help with the communication side if possible. Becca.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Paul. So in a moment, I'm just going to share a poll with you all just to get some initial feedback on what you think of this approach that Paul's just talked through. So particularly around continuing with these routine webinars on a regular basis, but then having the more deep dive explainer sessions as well. So if you just give me one moment there, I'm going to launch a poll just to get your feedback on that. Okay. So I've launched a poll there. Hopefully you can see that in front of you. So this is specifically in regards to the communications approach that the poll just shared with you all. And the poll is on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is strongly disagree and 5 is strongly agree. To what extent do you agree that the proposed communication plan meets your needs? So you're able to vote there on a scale of 1 to 5. And then there is also a supplementary question if you wish to take part, which is to make any suggestions as to how you feel that the approach could be improved. So hopefully everyone can see that poll. If I could get a thumbs up from someone just to let me know that that is working. Yeah, fab. Thanks, Luke. Great. Okay. So I will just allow that poll to continue on in the background. As I say, please do participate in the poll. It's really helpful to get your feedback. And then in the meantime, I will just get the slides back up there. And I will hand over to Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Becca. Morning, everybody. Great to have you all here. I'm glad we got over the muting problem at the beginning there. A little teaser for a Monday morning. I'm Jim Cardwell, Head of Energy Systems Policy here. Some of you might know me quite well, but it's good to be here today talking about connections reform. This first slide here is really that I'm talking to is just about the overall process, and I think this is motherhood and apple pie to many of you, but we didn't want to just sort of brush past it and just get straight into lots of glorious detail. So when we think about the existing projects, so this is those of you who might have a long-standing transmission access, or some of those 150 that have been pouring in the first part of this year with new offers coming in from NESO. We've got about 430 that qualify as such, and it's those of you in that 430 that are going to be going through this process in the first of these the existing queue, the existing projects, and getting your assessments redone, if you like, through these new connections reform processes. So the first step is to look at protection, and that's why it's so important for people to understand that. As Paul's just mentioned, there'll be some changes with the Ofgem decision into the way it was going, so there's a bit more protection for some more customers through that process. And that's why it's so important that we're proposing a fairly early explainer deep dive on those protection checks, so you can understand how that affects you and your project, because that then impacts you, how you then go through both the readiness checks and the needed assessment. And it's really the needed assessment, the so-called strategic alignment checks, are set out in Clean Power 2030, where we've got those capacity allowances by technology, that if you are protected in some ways, it means that you are protected from being screened, if you like, and being removed from the queue by virtue of not fitting within a capacity allowance. So that's the importance of protections, and that goes to the needed assessment. The readiness checks, the readiness assessment: are you ready? Are you meeting the planning or the land rights requirements? That still goes ahead. Everyone needs to be ready, and then we get into the revised NESO connections queue that then takes place through the course of the summer. And I'm going to move on to talk about that now. So Becca, if you wouldn't mind doing a +1, thank you. So let's go one more click, please. So this is the existing queue, and I guess firstly, looking in the rearview mirror, that's what's already happened this year. We since the last webinar we had with you back in, I think it was probably February, I think it was last time we had this kind of webinar on the general. We were talking there about the any distribution applications and acceptances that are coming to us. By middle of January, we're likely to beat the transmission application pause. So for generation and storage, that pause is now in place. We can't ask for any new transmission access currently, so they're queuing up at the moment. They won't meet the existing projects criteria for this current window. And of course, we have the Ofgem decision on April the 15th that Paul's just taken us through. So let's go +1, please, Becca. Now we've got the green bars are when our distribution portal is going to open, and we're going to be going for seeking and encouraging those of you with projects in this existing queue to submit your evidence, submit your details to us, so that we can make sure we can spend that time between those two green bars to make sure that we can review that with you and give you any feedback and help you to get ready for the pink or magenta bars, which are the NESO's the transmission window that then opens later in the summer. And the whole idea there is then that effectively what we're doing in Northern Powergrid and what other DNOs are doing with their information is giving you a longer time to have a run up to those pink windows, so that we can make sure. And I guess the sooner you get that information into us, the more time we've got to look at it, and the more time we've got to help you with any issues with that, so we can do more of those checks required to get that done. So that's the key point there. And then of course the Gate 2 application window will close. That's I think it's end of July, early August, something like that. Let's move on, please, Becca. The next sort of key one in that sort of September date is that we expect to be able to, customers to be made aware of status. And what we mean by that is we can be quite clear with you as to whether your project has gone into that Gate 2 whole queue reform in the summer, or whether you've not met the criteria at that opening stage, if you like, to get into that assessment. And then of course there's a lot of assessment to be done, decisions to be made by NESO in terms of who has met the readiness criteria, who has met the needed criteria, and then we expect to get these answers coming back. And I guess there's the key where we have confidence in the timeline, if you like, is all the way up to the green and the pink bars, where we're having conversations with NGET and NESO at the moment. It's about just how we work that with receiving those offers, how they come through, when they come through. So you've seen in the Ofgem decision some expectations from Ofgem as to when those offers are coming out, if you like. So this is very much a conversation that's been going on about phasing of those offers. So if you like, the most straightforward offers are going to be those that are almost built or are going to be built in 2026. That's going to be largely making use of the existing transmission system that we have today, rather than requiring lots of network build, and they should be quite relatively straightforward. So we do expect to release those this year for some of those. But then, of course, the longer ones are some of those ones that are in the later phases that might be, say, for example, post 2035. You might have a post 2035 date, and you might put your hand up for advancement, and you might be seeking to get advanced. And that you might be attached to a new GSP at the moment. So tens of millions of pounds, long lead times. They're going to have longer requirements for NGET to restudy those and look at the revised queue and see what they can do to bring those projects forward. They're clearly going to take longer, and I also expect those to come out into 2026. So that kind of phasing and batching of the things is a very active dialogue at the moment. And so I guess next time we meet on these, I'd expect all that to be resolved, and we can give you a much clearer picture of that back end of the process and when you can expect to get that. But basically, it's think about that continuum and not treating all projects the same, if you like, making sure that the easier decisions can be released quicker to give you certainty as customers at the earliest possible time. So let's move on, please, Becca. Thank you. So just a few images now, I suppose, of our customer data upload portal that we expect to open in May. So this will be on our website, and this is very much going to follow the lead from NESO in terms of saying these are the requirements that we need to take. So we are significantly heavily engaged with NESO as the readiness declaration forms and the requirements are being set out. And Will might say a bit more about that when he talks on behalf of NESO. I won't speak on his behalf. So we're setting this up. Other DNOs are doing the same, and we're looking to go live in May. As I say, it's that early establishment of the DNO window to give you more time to get your things together and to get them into us. So if we can just advance, please, Becca. Just some images here. There's the go live. That's what's going to be the go button. Keep going, Becca, please. So this is the sort of thing you're going to see. So on the right-hand side, you'll see it'll enable you to start filling up your application. It'll give you the ability to go back to it if you like, and go back in and update and redo and build it through time. But I think it's going to be pretty helpful to help you through that process. Next one, please, Becca. Yeah, and the next. and the next. Run out eventually, and the next. Yes, I think that might be getting near the end. Anyway, you got the picture. So yeah, it's all about helping you. And the next stages of that are really about making sure that we get that launched in May. We've got a couple of customers to test it for us, hopefully very soon. So hopefully they can give it we've already done some testing internally. We want to do that as well. So I'm now going to move on to the new enduring transmission access application process. So those of you who live in code, everything I've just been talking about was CMP 435. That was the CUSC mod that got approved by Ofgem in April for the existing projects. And this one now is CMP 434 and for our enduring process. Because of course, although we're concentrating very much on that really busy period we've got now and with you as customers into the summer, we're also really focused on the first of those enduring windows, which we expect to open probably in early December is our current view of that, best view of that for the moment. And when we've got 100 or so projects going through that, which is our best view at the moment, so up to 100, as Paul mentioned right at the start, these are the sort of things we're going to be looking to do to make sure we can establish those new processes, because this is a very different way of doing it to the way we've done. So you've got a blend here of things that we've done in the past, but then some new things as well. So the first point on going left to right, as you'd expect, is about giving you visibility of what is needed before and during the application. So this is about us making sure that you're not wasting your time coming to us where we've got no space, and we're telling you at the various earliest stages when we don't have space for a particular technology. That's really important. We've got these transmission windows that open twice a year for 6 weeks with the applications. So again, this is generation and storage is what I'm talking about here, not demand. That's not part of this process. We'll still have customer surgeries to talk about project specific details. We do encourage you to apply early, and then so once we can start doing that, then we can in the same way that we're doing for the existing projects this year, when we get into these new ways of doing it for the enduring windows, the earlier you can get it, the more we can work with you to try and make sure that your application is a good one. We'll obviously be handing out timely quotations in terms of distribution offers will still be coming to you. And it's when you accept those that you get into this sort of transmission process. And a key point about timely transmission applications, and this is the, I can't remember Paul's terminology now, but the famous Wacom 2, he might have said. So this is the point about we've got very prescriptive and very tight timescales to make sure we turn you around and get you into the next application window. So that's the processes we're working on at the moment. But our systems and our processes internally and our resources are all lined up to make sure that we achieve that. Then we've got getting you the Gate 2 offers as soon as we get those back from NESO. And then finally, you've got, if you haven't got a Gate 2 offer, which is successful, where you get into the transmission queue, you can have a Gate 1 offer, which will come back to you if you haven't qualified for Gate 2. And at that point, you'd then have an indicative offer for both distribution and transmission. So essentially, you'd have to either reconsider your project and withdraw, or reapply in a future window, and then seek to get a new queue position at that point. So these are the processes we're going through. We're updating our systems at the moment, and we're also thinking about what those processes are to support these whole new enduring processes. Next slide, please, Becca. So this is in sort of that timeline form. So next click, please. This is for the new processes, for the new projects that are not going through the existing queue to whole queue this year. And of course, so this means that you accepted your distribution offer after the middle of January. So you didn't get in before the pause that NESO got in place at the moment. So you're sort of queuing up, if you like, ready for this. Next, please. When's that window going to open? Probably early December. I think Ofgem in its decision document said that it expects, has put its expectation on NESO that it expects the window to open before the end of the year, and I suspect we'll want to stay well clear of the Christmas period. So probably early mid-December might be when it is, but we'll see. Of course, what we need to think about internally is when our window from when we can retask our portal when we've moved on, and we'll be deciding that later on this summer as to when we open that, because again, back to the principle of seeking to get your applications in as early as we can to help you, to give you longer to upload that data. So then we get NISO clock start on those. Next, please, Becca. We move forward. We'll need to accept offers coming back from them to us. Next, please, Becca. There we go. Next, please, Becca. And one more, I think. Yeah. So I guess the key point is that we've got, offers will be out then in the spring from us, on the back of what comes back from that portal. And then the key next step is, of course, then it repeats. So then we're into a world where this is repeating 6 months on 6 months. So you'd expect us to set you some dates for that and keep you informed of that. So this is kind of indicative at the moment. It's TBC, as it says at the top. NISO hasn't set when that window is yet, so we haven't got those. But it's just to let you know that we are thinking about that, because if you're one of those up to 100 projects that gets to the stage, obviously, as we progress this year, it'll be a regular question you'll be wanting to know from us. So we're on it, but we don't have the full details of that yet. Next, please, Becca. So one of the things we're doing here in these new projects coming through that are going to go is have these new application entry requirements. So this is the standard application form, and we from the start of this year with other DNOs have gone where we've beefed up, if you like, the content that we're looking for from projects for them to be deemed a competent application for a distribution offer. And that's what you see on the left hand side, where we're asking for details of your project and effectively raising the standard to get into the queue. We're raising the standard, and as it says at the bottom there, this is then aligned to the transmission assessment readiness criteria. The idea being that if we can get these things sorted at the first time you approach us, it's going to smooth your path through the rest of the process, and also it's going to screen out if there's an unviable or a speculative kind of project that is less well defined. It's going to keep those out of the way and naturally promote then those projects that are ready to proceed and are ready to progress, which is the key part of this, because this is about supporting the intent of the NISO reforms that Ofgem and DESNZ have championed and approved, about making sure that we get in place a system, a queue in the future that's full of really good projects that we can really progress and get on with and get delivered here. And just to give you a bit of insight to how this is going, so you see in the red blob top right there, we've had 107 applications since January, and they've gone into a triage process. And then the blue one, we've got 31 that have met that new criteria. We've got 15 that have been cancelled due to insufficient details, and we've got 61 still going through that process under review. So, this is already working in terms of providing that sort of quality threshold and that important hurdle that as a viable project should have no problem getting through these tests and making sure you get into the queue and getting yourself set up for that transmission access further on down the process. Next, please, Becca. Technical limits and accelerating connections. Paul's already talked about this. So now sort of twisting, I suppose, to talk really about and sort of conclude my remarks on what we're doing about getting on with the build. So this is one of Paul's themes right at the beginning there. And the technical limits, and you see the little chart there on the right hand side that's built some actual data, but just mean it there as a schematic, if you like, where we see what the output in a particular area is, and the orange bar that goes across there is giving us a limit for a particular GSP. And then you can see there in the red, it's a technique where we can ask customers, if you want to be accelerated and you're prepared to accept a risk of curtailment, there'll be half hours where you are curtailed, and then obviously a period in blue where you're not curtailed. So it's a way to get people on, a form of flexible access onto the system. And we've now formally contracted with 1.6 gigawatts compared to about 5 gigawatts of existing generation storage. So, material amount. That's 38 projects, an average 7 years of acceleration compared to what the firm connection date is in the BCA. Those offers have really turned down because we've pretty much this is not a blanket rule, okay, but we've pretty much got to the end of the phases that we went through with technical limits, in that we've got the for the contracts that we were able to get from NESO and NGET to roll this out. We've largely sent that out. Now there are some customers that we're still progressing with, but we're really only wishing to do that once we can be confident that the customer is not going to have a sort of a start and then a stop, if you like, to move them forward with technical limits, and then for connections reform to then cause them to be removed from the queue. So that would be the furthest from where we want to be on this. And also we're just trying to make sure we devote our attention to say that our key focus now is about getting these connections reforms in and using that as the means to get people promoted in the queue. That's the way that we turn now. That's the technique we're going to be following. So keep talking to us if you're in process with us, and we'll give you an indication of where our head's at. And but we're down into some individual conversations now with customers on this. But pretty much, if you're not in dialogue with us already, don't expect to hear much on this at the moment. We expect technical limits to have a bit of a lull while we focus on the connections reform, and then we're going to be coming back to it, because on the back of connections reform, we still see this as a really valid technique. Flexible connections can be really valuable for some customers to get you connected ahead of a longer wait or a longer duration. So that was that. And then if we'll move it forward, please, Becca, to just talk a bit more about network build and how we're ramping that up. So we've got a lot of build going on at the moment. I guess the key point is just to make sure that there's no misunderstanding here. Connections reform and the reevaluation of the queue does not mean work has stopped. Far from it. We're seeing through this and looking beyond that, and saying we expect a number of projects to be promoted here. We see this as a way, the connections reform work, to get more projects into build, and that's why all the work we're doing at the moment is making sure that we're getting ready for some of the projects that haven't yet started, but also in the meantime making some really important preparatory actions. So as well as those technical limits projects that we're building out, and Paul mentioned earlier, we've also made commitments to invest £51 million in connections-driven distribution network reinforcement, and 27 million of that has commenced in the last couple of months. And we expect that pipeline of 51 million to double to sort of mid-90s, about 96 million is on our current plans, to almost double in the coming weeks. So what we're looking at is looking at the pattern of projects that we expected to come through connections reform, and recognising that there's going to be some distribution reinforcement work required on a number of your projects, and we're not pausing, we're not stopping on that. These are really important works that need to progress. They're really important works that need to get you such that when you get your transmission offers, for those of you who get promoted in the queue and get through to get your gate 2 offers, we want to make sure that the distribution network is keeping pace with that as well, and we're pushing forward with this with the reinforcement work on the distribution network, and that does require to get new resources being sourced to deliver that. So we're increasing the number of project managers and engineers, delivery engineers, to get this work delivered. And also, I mean, the key point is, as you're well aware, we've got big lead times on equipment, so we're looking to get those orders raised and get those into process such that we keep the focus on getting people built out and getting them energized in that period up to 2030. But the key point is that all the works I'm talking about here are all due for completion by 2029. You know, such is the way with distribution jobs, that are generally shorter in timescale than transmission jobs. Next slide, please, Becca. So this is my final one for now. And it was just really to sort of summarise in a bit of detail, I suppose, on left and right, for action, for information, on what we're doing. So because we're moving out of a phase here in April, which was all about preparation, to May, which is about getting that upload going, getting that flow of information going on your specific projects for the existing projects queue. That's what May's all about, and that's what these actions are here to help you with. So the first for action there, Paul mentioned it. we think we've now got validated details for all 430 projects. That's about 200 customers. So, on average, 2 projects each. We've got your details for your projects. But of course, there's movement in the marketplace. We're well aware of that. So if your project's changing, or you don't think we've got your contact details, we'd rather you over communicated with us, quite frankly, because what we don't want to do is miss you off the bus as this thing leaves the station, and we want to make sure that you're fully involved in this. So there's a link to get a web form to give us your details. So please give us your details if you think you've been missed off that list. The key thing is then that we've got for our small and medium generators, so anyone below 100 megawatts, it's going to be through get ready, because our portal's going to be coming open soon, and we'll be letting you know when that happens. Large generators, those on beggars above 99.9, you're going to be going straight into the NESO portal, so that's a different process for how it's going to run. And Paul mentioned we've got those explainer webinars coming up. So in May, we're looking at protections and hybrids. So as we release that information to you, don't think you can sign up at the moment, but we'll be following up pretty hot on the heels of this one. The last webinar was 2 weeks ago, so they're coming thick and fast at the moment, and we'll continue to communicate and give you that, so please sign up. And then we get into the for information things. So there's some helpful frequently asked questions. These are being created by NESO, contributed to by all DNOs as well, because what we're trying to do is trying to give you, one answer rather than loads of answers. It's already complex enough without different interpretations. So trying to give you some standard answers, and that they're them. Obviously, you've got the Ofgem decision, hundreds of pages, as Paul mentions. So plenty to keep you occupied there. We've got the updated NESO methodologies. Will might say something about those shortly, I don't know, but that's something that's coming up. So the Ofgem decision necessitated NESO updating some of its detailed working. And finally, and this is on the critical path for us getting that our portal open, got NESO's final guidance on completing the readiness declaration form, so on the readiness information. That's coming through as well. So they're probably the key points. There's loads going on as always, so hopefully that's useful to you. That's what we think are some of the key things you might want to think about right now if you want to get ready for the existing projects and how they're going to get into connections reform in the coming weeks. It's not far now. So at that, Will, I'm going to hand over to you, and you're going to send us something from NESO. Over to you, Will.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Jim, and thanks very much for this opportunity. Very much appreciated, given the importance and the pace of change of connections reform. I'm going to build on what Jim said and kind of set out the next steps and the extra customer comms that the NESO is doing. I'm Will Wilson, and I was wanting to give a NESO update following the recent Ofgem decision. As Jim set out, this sets the wheels in motion for implementing Gate 2 to the whole queue. And as Jim explained, we will open the transmission window for 3 weeks during July, from 8th of July to 29th of July. To hit this window, there's quite a bit of comms going out to help developers prepare. This means in the next few days, and by the end of April, we will be publishing the updated methodologies. These will reflect the changes Ofgem have requested and that Paul and Jim have explained. After that, we'll be running a connections reform customer webinar on the 13th of May at 11 AM. This will be setting out the connections reform process post Ofgem decision. This date is hot off the press and was only confirmed on Friday last week, so you've heard it here first. No doubt you'll see subsequent NESO comms over the next few days. After that, in mid-May, we'll be running a readiness declaration customer webinar. This will be an opportunity to find out more about the final readiness declaration after all the updates, after the minor tweaks that have happened post Ofgem decision. After that, in mid to late May, and together with the ENA, the ENA and NESO will be publishing the Connections Reform Joint Guidance Handbook. This is a joint development document across DNOs and the NESO. It covers both transmission and distribution and explains how to apply into the connection reform Gate 2 to the whole queue process. Lastly, and throughout the whole month, we will be updating on other connection reform modifications, such as CMP 446, which is looking at increasing the transmission impact assessment from 1 megawatt to 5 megawatts, and also CMP 448, which is the project commitment modification fee, a project commitment fee modification, and we'll be doing those as updates become available. So that's my whistle-stop tour of kind of the NESO comms that we'll be doing over the next month. So I'm handing back to Paul. Thanks very much.
No, thanks very much, Will, and thanks for you coming along today. Really, really appreciate it. I'm sure our customers are delighted that we've got a NESO voice with us today. So I'll just reiterate the position that Jim's pushed through to us. There are a lot of moving parts. It is fast moving. We want to keep communicating with you. We are getting on with it. We've been absolutely running for 9 months on this. We have been watching the methodologies and working with them and being absolutely clear about what does it mean for the 430 projects in our queue. We want to communicate with you, as I set out earlier, with deep dives and detailed sessions. And the team wants to make themselves available for discussions, of course, but obviously with 220 or so customers with, as Jim says, an average of 2 projects. That's a lot of work for our team. So the more we can do in the deep dive is better. And I just wanted to re-emphasize the point we often get asked, are we resourced to deliver? We are. The team's been added to in the last few months, and we are already building some of the technical limits and the reinforcement projects in terms of our construction teams, and that's going to be really important. As we go through these webinars, we'll increasingly talk about completion of projects and getting people connected, and that's what we all want throughout. I'm sure you guys all want speeded up connection dates, and then you'll want to hear from us about how your projects or how the projects are developing through. So construction will be a large piece of these webinars into 2027, I would imagine. I will leave the key messages there and go to Becca back for Q&A, but thanks everyone for attending today. Let's get some great questions.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Paul. So for the remainder of the webinar, we are moving into the Q&A section. We did get some questions submitted in advance of the webinar, and throughout the webinar, I know you've been posting questions within the Q&A. Please continue to do that. Once we've gotten through all of the questions we've had so far, if we've got time, we will also offer the opportunity for you to raise your hand and ask your question verbally as well. As I mentioned right at the start, if we do run out of time, I can't answer your questions, we will make sure that we follow up after the webinar, but we'll try and get through as many questions as we can. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to you now, Luke, to take us through the Q&A.
Thanks, Becca. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all well. We've got lots of questions submitted, as Becca says, so we're going to start with the pre-submitted. So, Brad, just for your information, I'll start with question 1, the pre-submitted, and you can move into 2 and 3. So, first question, please provide more clarity on distribution gate 1 timescales and scope. When will projects lose their point of connection? So closure of the CMP 435, that's the existing agreement window review. Indicate phases announced after the gate 2 offers expire. And for projects without TIA, so transmission impact assessment by CMP 435 closure, are their point of connections already indicative, or will they get a chance to receive a gate 2 offer in the CMP 434, so that's the new enduring window, before they lose their point of connection? So the network studies for 435 will happen in around Q4. So for 434 will happen in around Q4 this year. So those that NESO deem not to have met the criteria will become gate 1 indicative both at T and D. That is the plan. So you'll probably be informed around this status in mid-September, which has been outlined in the Ofgem paper and the decision as well. So it's around mid-September when you'll get to know. If you've lost your position in the 435, you will have a chance to go again if you're ready and you do meet the strategic alignment in the new enduring window. So I hope that answers that question. Brad, on to yourself.
Thanks, Luke. Morning, everyone. I'll take the next question, and that is, Ofgem recommends protection clause 3 to cover projects which have no outcome by CMP 435 closure. Does this mean if my project 1 submitted planning by the 20th of the 12th, 2024, 2 is refused prior to CMP 435 closure, and 3 gets consent through appeal in the future, I no longer qualify for protection clause 3? Or does NISO interpret no outcome as in no positive outcome? So the answer to this question is, as your project's part of the existing agreements as part of CMP 435 even, and your appeal is successful, you'll be able to apply in any of the new enduring CMP 434 windows. The next question I had was, it was previously mooted that distribution offers can submit Gate 2 evidence whenever they're ready, which DNOs will then submit to NISO in the next Gate 2 window. Does the approved WACM 2 part of CMP 434 mean this is no longer possible, or will NISO accept evidence submissions from DNOs year round, but only process them during the gated process? So in answer to this question, a project can be submitted to the DNO all year round. However, the T window is only going to open twice a year, so it's encouraged that you submit to the DNO as early as possible ahead of the as early as possible, so you'll be ahead in the distribution queue. Elliot, I'll hand over to you for your question.
Cheers, Brad. So the next two questions I've got are specifically related to submitting information to the readiness declaration and for your readiness criteria. So the first one is, will we need to fill in the NISO declaration template and send it to you for each technology within our hybrid site? So as we've showed you in the presentation, we have our own portal, which is basically our own version of the readiness declaration template, and that will ask the specific questions that the template does. For a hybrid site, you will have an opportunity in our portal to list your access requirements for different technologies as part of your hybrid. Those that want to export to the network anyway. So that answers that one. The second question is, on our site boundary and layout has changed quite a bit since we applied to Northern Powergrid for our grid contract. Should we update or agree the layout changes now with Northern Powergrid before we submit the red line boundary plan for supporting our CMP 435 application? So for this, it depends on how long ago you applied. You could have made your site smaller, like you say. It was all on planning data, but the key that comes with the red line boundary is all the methodology states is the original red line boundary, which is what you submitted. So what piece of land you were looking at, and if any changes have been made that we aren't aware of, we would encourage you to come to us, your single point of contact, for instance, and just say, look, this is how it was. This is how it is, and we would want to work with you to make sure that was all still allowable and that it wasn't going to impede you once you go into the process to get your readiness. So those were my two questions. I think we've got Martin next. Martin?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So the next question that I've got is about milestones. And the question is, can we confirm relating to milestone 7 that having made all stage payments requested to date to Northern Powergrid would suffice to tick this milestone off? And the answer is yes. Milestone M7 is any of the following. So I'm just going to read out 4 criteria here, and it's any of these: a binding contract for main plant equipment, or stage payment made to the network company, or board paper evidencing final investment decision, or a subsidy award. So that's the answer to that question. And back to you, Luke.
Yes, thanks, Martin. So I think in answer to that person's question around is the stage payments and keeping them up to date, is that suffice? The answer is yes, based on those options that Martin provided. So the next question is, can you confirm timescales for evidence submission to NPG for embedded projects? As James just gone through in the nice timeline slide where you had the 2 green lines, we're looking to go out mid-May. That's when we'll launch the customer readiness declaration. We're hoping to get that tested this week and finalised by some customers. We've done our own internal testing, but we just want that final by some select customers, and then we'll be looking to come out to you and we'll notify you ASAP. Thank you. Brad?
Thanks, Luke. So the next question we have is, could you confirm if there's a plan showing up and coming point of connection areas of saturation? How can you, if you have an application in, move the process forward? So in answer to this question, the process is to address the areas of saturation, ensuring only those projects that are needed can connect. Once the process is concluded, we'll be updating the open portal data to reflect the headroom. I'll hand back over to you, Elliot.
Yeah, cheers. I'll just add a little bit more onto the back of that one as well, Brad. What we're saying there is basically the current process that we're in is we've come to this point because we're saturated. Yeah, the problem is we can't get the connections in where we want to get them to. And so obviously by going through this process, it unlocks capacity, and we're looking to try and share that information with you as soon as we can. And therefore we get the connections cog turning again. Yeah. The next question I had is quite a big one. It's do the reforms ensure that network operators are designing the lowest possible cost electricity network for bill payers? We are concerned that selected projects only based upon readiness will result in ready projects connecting that trigger socialized reinforcements, and that this will result in increases to bill payers, where less ready projects could instead be chosen that require less reinforcements to be carried out. That's a good point. And basically what that question is saying is, what if all the projects that go into the pipeline to be built that are ready require significant work, yeah, and therefore significant assets and significant reinforcement, whereas there could be some other projects that maybe aren't quite ready, which have simpler connection solutions and require less assets. Is there a balance in the scale on that? And it is a very valid point. I suppose that the main part on that question is really the processes to unlock connecting people and connecting renewables to the system to meet what is CP 2030. And obviously we can only connect what is ready to be connected. Yeah. Which is sort of been taken out of all of our hands. Yeah, there is a view from government that obviously this connection of all the renewable technologies will ultimately lower bill prices. I think that's what we're all hoping for in the end game. And as well, I suppose if you wanted a little bit more context on how they've looked at that and come to that conclusion, there is an impact assessment which is based on the decision that was made to go through connections reform, which you can access and take a look at when you feel you want to. Yeah, on that one, I think.
Can I come on to that? Sorry.
Yeah.
I just say that, and none of this changes the charging boundary rules. So the charging boundary rules stay as they were before. So, you know, it would be unlikely to significantly impact any upstream works that would be required on the D network.
Cheers, Paul. After this round, we've got Martin.
Thank you. Just coming off mute there. So the next question is, if some Northern Powergrid connection offers become Gate 1 following the Gate 2 to whole queue assessment, will Northern Powergrid reassess all connection offers in case lower cost connection options can be offered to Gate 2 projects? So the answer here is that there are no point of connection changes for distribution projects from the CMP 435 review, except of course where a new GSP was proposed and is no longer required or needed. And the likelihood of those schemes would simply be that they revert back to the GSP that they applied for. But if schemes do drop away from a GSP, other connecting schemes may benefit from cost savings, from reinforcement that's no longer needed as a result of those schemes falling away. And with that, we'll go to Luke.
Thanks, Mon. So the next question I've got is quite short, so I've had to do a bit of an interpretation. It says implications for projects to be connected at 2026-2027. So I believe the question they might be asking is about protection clauses. So if your scheme is connecting on or before the 31st of December 2027 now, and you've met the milestones outlined in the methodology, you'll be protected from the strategic alignment. I hope that answers that short question. Rod?
The question I've got is a bit of a tongue twister, so I'll attempt to put my teeth back in for the first sentence. So on the NISO draft declaration template, there is a question on line 12. Is your existing agreement staged? And this question is not applicable to any small, medium embedded generators who are connecting to the distribution network, as they will be asked to complete a separate declaration per stage. So what does the MPG separate declaration per stage look like? What is likely to be required? So in answer to this is there's no stage projects at a DNO level. You do have to submit a declaration for each inquiry number, and for hybrids, each technology which is exporting to the network is the answer to that question. I'll hand you back over to Elliot.
Cheers, Brad. The next one I have is the connections pause was originally planned to finish by the end of May at the latest, with reform now being approved in the timeframe state that the application window won't be open until later in 2025. Does that mean all new applications, including demand, are still on pause until a date is confirmed? So, yeah, the first enduring window is opening Q4 this year. And that's when everything will sort of get back on track, which is in line with the Ofgem decision. Yeah. I'll just hand over to Luke for the next one.
Yeah, so next question, what changes will be required for offshore wind grid connection and any requirements of energy storage along with grid connection point? So 2. So wind has been looked at favourably, both offshore and onshore, in terms of what they have introduced. So for offshore wind, there's a letter of authority offshore equivalent, and it's known as a letter of acknowledgement. And that's issued by the Crown of Estate or Crown of Estate Scotland. They'll also need to meet the readiness criteria and strategic alignment, as do all the other projects. And with regards to energy storage BESS, we're looking to be quite oversubscribed, but they will need to meet the readiness and strategic alignment like other projects. On.
Thank you, Luke. So a short question, what will happen to offers that are currently curtailed when lots of projects fall out of the queue? Will a new offer be issued with updated curtailment value? And a nice straightforward answer to that is yes, we will be looking to update curtailment assessments as a result of the reformed queue. So over to Brad.
Thanks, Martin. It's a fairly short question and fairly short answer for this one. So when do you expect the NISO application pause to end? So Q4 of 2025, when the new enduring window is proposed to open, as outlined by Ofgem, is the answer to that question. I'll hand you over to Elliot for what I think is the last of the pre-written questions.
Cheers, Brad. Yeah, this is the last of the pre-submitted ones, and I think we might be having a look at some in the chat, but we'll go to that in a bit. So the next question is, will the window for submitting evidence for the Gate 2 to whole queue for DNOs be open until the close of the NISO window, or will it close earlier? So we had this all confirmed. It will be open in mid-May and close at the same time as the transmission window, which is the end of July as per the current timescales. So I'll just hand to Luke now.
Thanks, Elliot. So, yep, as you said, that was the last of the pre-submitted, and we'll go to the chat now. And we've got a question from Evie. Please, can you clarify whether the red line boundary has to be the exact copy of the original red line boundary, or if it's okay providing the one submitted as evidence fits within the boundary of the original? Elliot, I know you've been doing some work on that.
Yeah, cheers, I'll have this one. So, yeah, basically, as I said earlier, whatever you submitted previously is what you've submitted. Yeah, that is going to be the boundary that we have on file. Yeah, if you've made some changes to that, i.e. you've made your site smaller or the layout a bit, we want to know, we want to see. Yeah, there is going to be some guidance released which we've been working on, which shows what we expect to see on your red line boundary submission through the readiness declaration. So you won't be left completely in the dark wondering, how do I do this? Yeah, so keep an eye out for that guidance. But I hope those little rules give you a bit of a steer for now until the guidance is released.
Martin, have you got one in the chat?
So if we decide to reduce our capacity or remove a technology as part of the Gate 2 exercise, will we need to submit updated G99 paperwork to you along with our Gate 2 to whole queue evidence?
Yeah, so the answer to that is no, there's not a new G99 needed, because as part of the customer readiness declaration form, there is a section in there which you fill in to let us know that you're doing exactly that.
Thank you, Luke. Are we going to Elliot next?
Yeah, I'll take the next one. Right. How much time after you get the project progression information back from NISO will you need before providing this information to the customer in an updated connection offer? We've heard rumours that you may require up to an additional 10 weeks before this updated connection offer is made. The answer to this question is I don't think we're quite there on how we're going to do that or how long it's going to take. We understand obviously that things will change following the results back from the reform, but we're not quite there yet on exactly what we do in that scenario.
I think that add to it is where, as we said throughout the slides, we're more than resourced and ready for the offers coming back. But we've got to take our time to be able to review the offers, make sure that they're fit for purpose, and we've got a team ready to go. So I guess it's as quick as NISO get the offers over, which we're told they're going to try and produce them, pretty quick. And then it's a time for us to review them, make them sufficient, and then we'll be writing the letters to yourselves for you to then have a read and digest.
Luke, it's Jim here. Can I just come in on the back of that as well and just say I think I agree with everything you just said, and I guess when I was talking in my earlier comments and talking about that slide and talking about that, the second half of the slide, if you like, after the gate has closed and everything, and that's the subject of that very involved conversation at the moment between us and NISO to zero in on these very questions, and I think it will depend on which bit of the phasing and the batching we're doing, because some tasks are going to be a lot quicker than others. So, for example, I talked about the earliest batch of offers that we expect to get out to customers to tell them where they stand is on those customers who've got some of the best protection in terms of the 2026 connections. And it's really unlikely that anything we get back, as long as we get back from NISO an offer that's all in the right place, there's no errors in it, it's all appropriate, then it shouldn't take us too long to spin that out and to get that updated offer out to customers, because that's pretty much a connection that's happening very, very soon, and there's not a lot that's going to change, and it should be fairly straightforward. It should be updated commercials and out it goes. Compare that then to the other one at the other end of the spectrum I talked about, which was where the existing offer was for a new GSP in 2038. And there might be some more detailed works required there. We might need to do more distribution re-evaluation of that and see how that. Now, what we're going to try and do that is try and parallel process as much of that as possible. So some of the conversation we're having with NISO and NGET is to say, let's not do a process where we just wait for it to pop out the pipe and then we open it like a sort of present on Christmas Day. We go, I wonder what's in this offer. We want to have sight of that offer as NGET are preparing it so that we can start to do some of our thinking about what the efficient distribution solution is that still fits with that transmission solution that's going to be coming our way. So I appreciate the question was, how long will it take? And I'm going a very long answer to say that. But I'd say that one of the planning assumptions being talked about at the moment is, what about 6 weeks as a sort of a kind of a target for there? But that's very much then in the conversation about saying, well, compare that to the straightforward case and the more complex case, and what does that mean for other batches, etc., etc. That's exactly the sort of conversation we're having to better plan that out and then get the resources lined up. And then, as I said, keep an eye on it as it comes closer and closer to that, so that we can work and do our work alongside the work that the transmission parties are doing to minimise that time as much as possible.
Thanks, Jim. So there's another question in the chat, and it says, please can NPG keep an open connections reform Q&A register? And Will, I don't know if you want to come in on the back of this, but as networks, so through the ANA and with NESO, we've produced an all collaborative question and answer, which is actually in the slides, and we'll continue to keep that updated. I mean, Will, when was the last time that was updated?
It's updated as questions come in. I don't know the exact date of the last one that was updated, but yeah, this is very much a case of as Q&A comes in, we update the NESO Q&A.
Thanks, and we'll continue to do that. Martin, do you want to go to the next question?
Yep, thank you, Luke. So the next question has just been masked by a chat that's popped up. So 1 second while I try and remove it. The question was about distribution reinforcement works. How does Northern Powergrid intend to deliver reinforcement works for projects with current 2027 connection dates that may or may not change after Gate 2? And I think that's all about our own reinforcement program that was mentioned in the main body of the slide. So I'll just come to Jim to add anything to that.
Yeah, sure. So I guess this is part of the principle. I haven't got the question in front of me, but I heard you, Martin. You're saying there that it was about saying we've got some fairly immediate, near-term connection dates that we're hoping to get out of transmission for 2027. I think at the heart of this question is let's not have the distribution network then being the slowest part of the equation. Yeah, I think that's how I'm interpreting it anyway. Yeah. And that's very much in the theme of the comments I shared earlier, where there's tens of millions of pounds of distribution works that we are triggering now. We are not waiting for the final judgment to come out of the transmission works. We're getting on with it now. And that's because we feel able to do that, because when we look at the connections that are in different bits of our grid, there's a pretty low regrets investment that we can trigger, even though we don't know exactly which connections are going to go forward at this time, because we haven't had NESO's decisions given to us on the transmission system access. But we know, just due to the intensity and the mix of technologies at a particular location, we know that that bit of reinforcement work, whether it's fault level replacement or some switch gear or whatever else it is, we know it's going to be required. So we're pushing on with it with the very aim of not being in the situation I think the question was getting at, which is don't be the slow coach in this series of moves. So that's the reason for doing that. And that was the reason for sharing it, just to hopefully give confidence to people on this call that we are mindful of the risk and absolutely on with it.
Thanks, Jim. I think we're over to Brad next.
Thanks, Martin. The question I've got is, although embedded demand is out of scope of the reform, has MPG decided how mod apps for embedded demand will be handled, given that they're understood to be not to be subject to the gated process? Specifically, is MPG aiming to submit demand-only mod apps throughout the year or align them with the gated process? So, Luke, I don't know if you can help with the answer on this one.
Yeah, so embedded demand being out of scope is right for connections reform, meaning that it still continues the same process that it applies today. So we will send them to transition all year round. I know there's some talk, some ongoing conversations, and Will, I've NESO got an update on the demand and what happens in terms of aligning to the gated process on advancement and things like that.
Thanks, Luke. Right, so as you said, embedded demand is out of scope of connections reform, so can continue not and doesn't have to apply in the embedded window. Usually the question is about, well, what the question we've received a few times, and I'm wondering if this is where the question is aiming, is what happens is if there is if this embedded demand ends up being, and the embedded demand is behind a transmission constraint, and whether it can whether kind of embedded demand can benefit from kind of connections reform. And the answer is potentially yes. While the volume of such projects is thought to be relatively low, The ENA numbers suggest that of 3,600 demand projects, only 100, roughly 100 of them are behind transmission constraints. This is the process to explore advancement for such projects will not begin until after the queue formation process and design process has been undertaken in Gate 2 to the whole queue, rather than it being done alongside the whole Gate 2 to the project's assessment. And given the low numbers, we're not prioritising doing that until after. So fundamentally, yes, they potentially can, but this is going to be looked at more at the back end of the process after generation has been sorted out, largely because of the numbers involved, and the majority of embedded demand is not stuck behind transmission constraints.
Thanks, Will. So I've got a question from Arman, and it is, and Paul, I think this might come your way. Is the NPG Connections team interested in learning about how other countries with similar issues have addressed them?
And what I would say to that is, of course, we're always keen on hearing how things have been addressed, but obviously Northern Powergrid are a small part in the story. There's Ofgem and NESO involved, and what I understand is there's been quite a lot of looking around the world to see what other countries have done. But obviously, if there's things we can learn, then we'd love to hear about it. Yeah, good question. Thanks for that.
Martin, do you want to ask the next one?
Yeah, excuse me. Yes, thank you, Luke. So I think, Luke, you might be the person just to provide the polished answer to this one. It's about the application for a hybrid. So the question is, my understanding of the Gate 2 process for co-located projects is that if PV is strategically aligned, but BESS is not, it will get a Gate 2 queue position for the PV element of the project only, and the BESS a Gate 1 offer. Is this correct, or will you need to remove the BESS if you do not believe it will meet strategic alignment?
So the answer, so the first part of the question is this correct? It is yes. So the PV will receive the Gate 2 if it's strategic aligned and ready, and if the battery is not, then yes, it will get a Gate 1. But there is an opportunity through when we open up and launch the customer readiness declaration form, that if the customer wishes to remove the battery part because they know through what they're saying through the documentation that it's no longer needed, then they can do that ahead of submitting their evidence.
Thanks, Luke. Are we going to Elliot next?
Cheers, Martin. What we've got here is, will you be using the same readiness declaration template as NESO? And do you know when the final version of this will be released? First part of that is, yes, we're using the same readiness declarations as NESO. All the DNOs are. We've just sort of taken the readiness declaration and turned it into our online form. In terms of when the final version will be released, Luke, did you see some numbers this morning, some dates?
So mid-May is when it'll be released. But as we said before, we're just doing some testing, some final testing with customers, just to make sure it's ready. And mid-May will be the time when we'll launch it.
Cheers. Brad, do you want to pick one up?
Cheers, Elliot. I've got a question from Morgan Donnelly, and it's, does the 430 projects on your radar for Gate 2 to whole queue include those that are still waiting for their PP outcome letters? So I'll take this one. The answer is yes. And just as a bit of an update, the NGET side of the action is now completed. So NESO have now got all of the TOCO references for the offers. We're still taking in some of the offers from NESO at the moment, and we'll be in touch as soon as the review's taken place and we'll get the offer letters out to you. I'll hand back over to Luke.
Thanks, Brad. So there's one from Morgan Donnelly. Are you guys going to adjust your progression milestones so that they are backward facing like NESO do? If we end up with a Gate 2 Phase 2 post 2030 connection date after the summer's queue shuffle. So there's some work going on with the ENA, through the ENA, with networks where we're looking at the current queue management milestones. There's going to be an ENA webinar on the 8th of May. So what I would say is make sure you attend that and get up to speed with the changes. But as an initial overview, what we've been reviewing is aligning the transmission, which do have backward facing milestones for planning and things like that, where the connection date is well in advance. But yeah, 8th of May for the ENA webinar, where we'll launch the final changes, because it's still in discussion. Martin?
Yeah, thank you. So I've got a question here that I'm going to go to Jim for, but I do think there's been some conversation around it already, partly from Will from NESO. So has NPG and ENA worked out how to reassess transmission impact embedded demand projects that are currently sat with connection dates beyond 2030?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, really important question, isn't it? Because we recognise that you can get long lead times in demand as well as generation storage, and I think we did cover it earlier, because I think since maybe the question was asked, I think Will covered it in his comments. So just to briefly go back, my version of what Will's answer, which was that yes, we recognise that there could be opportunity here to go back through some long lead times in demand, and any that are impacted by that, see how they could then be fitted in with, once the connections queue has been reformed for the generation storage, how could that affect some demand projects as well? So we don't know exactly when, we don't know exactly how at this stage, but it's very much on the agenda to go back and to do that and see if we can improve some other offers out to customers.
Thanks, Jim. Are we going to Elliot next? I think we are.
Yeah. Cheers, Martin. We've got one here. What is the coordinate system required for the site? Also, where there are multiple land parcels for a single connection, how should the coordinates be input to evidence the submission? So this is a really good one. Stuff that we've been looking at in detail when we've been pulling the guidance together. Like I said earlier, we're gonna give you an example of what these submissions should look like in terms of the red line boundary, in terms of the coordinates. The coordinates are basically your typical, I think it's WSG format they called, and we're looking for your most northerly, easterly, southerly, westerly coordinate to be on a sheet, and that'll basically help NESO do a little polygon of the site when they're doing the detailed checks for that. That's what it'll be on there. And like I say, in our online form, we've got the boxes which you can populate and put those details in. For multiple sites, for multiple boundaries, sorry, for one site. So say if you've got, one boundary here for your metering sub and some inverters, and then you've got a field just over the way there with your PV arrays in, that's adjacent, you would just do the same for each parcel of land, and making sure that your red line boundary, your option agreement, and everything lines up with what that is. Yeah. Luke, is that Brad? Sorry, Brad, over to you.
Cheers, Elliot. So the next question I can see is for co-located projects, so PV and BESS. If there's sufficient available capacity for PV but not for BESS, will one receive a Gate 2 offer for the PV and a Gate 1 offer for the BESS? Will it still be possible to connect the BESS component behind the meter without using any import capacity? So Elliot or Luke might be one you can help with.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Yeah, so I think Luke touched on it earlier, but yeah, your PV won't be damaged by the fact that you've got a battery also connected to your hybrid site. Yeah, you will get readiness. You will apply for readiness for both your solar and your battery, and you would go through like that with your solar getting Gate 2 potentially in your battery, maybe not. Yeah, that's how you would do it. It says the second part is, will it still be possible to connect the BESS component behind the meter? Yes, you can do. When you come to us to request your readiness, you would need to tell us that you're changing that aspect of your site. And again, when the national guidance comes out, there is a lot of information in there about how we would expect to see your battery running behind the meter, so that it's not actually requiring access to the distribution network. Yeah, so keep an eye out for that guidance. I know I keep mentioning it, but it will be very helpful once it comes out.
Cheers, Elliot. I think it's Luke.
Yeah, thanks. So next question is, how will minimum acreage be clarified? Will it be by the G99 red line boundary or the land option agreement? If it's the latter, do NPG really have the expertise and resource to interrogate hundreds of complex option agreements? Elliot, do you want to take that? Because I know you've been doing some work on that.
Yeah, so with this one, like we said, we're trying to get resourced up. We've obviously noted that we're engineers, yet we're not land experts, and so we're working with our internal land experts to come up with a solution to how we check all this. In terms of how we calculate the minimum acreage, it's something really that you will do on your submission. You will have your red line boundaries for each parcel of land, if indeed you have more than one, using the calculations that are in the NISO methodology, and then that is what will give us the minimum acreage requirement of your site. When that comes in, we'll be checking that to see that it all aligns. But yeah, I mean, it's a moving target on how exactly it's going to be checked. But we definitely working to try and make sure that we can do it the best we can, and we're working with our own internal sort of land experts and our wheelies team to give us the best chance of getting it right. All right. Cheers, Luke.
Okay, I think the next question's on me. So I think I'm going to come to you for this, Luke. So it's about communication, and we talked in the webinar about the importance of keeping customers up to date, and we want to hear from customers as we go through this process. This particular question, I think, is about how we share the outcome of the Gate 2 process as it's progressing. And the question is, will Northern Powergrid publish a register of projects progressing to Gate 2? And if so, when? So I think that's more about sharing the wider outcome rather than a project-specific outcome.
So in terms of what's been communicated in the Ofgem decision, it's mid-September when we'll be letting customers know whether they're successful in the readiness criteria and strategic alignment. There is, I know obviously Will's on the call, which is good, always good to have. I know that NISO are producing something that's called the EA register, which also informs customers where they can go on at any time and look to see where they are in terms of a position. Are they successful or not? I mean, Will, I'm not sure if you want to give any more information on the EA register, but if NISO are doing it, we in turn, as NPG, will also be doing the same.
Thanks, Luke. The EA register is, as you say, is something that we will be publishing as kind of a outcome of the Ofgem decision. However, note the projects do not have to be, can indicate that they don't want to be on that EA register. That is an option available to them if they so choose. The thing that I think it's also worth bearing in mind that after we've done the queue formation, we'll be publishing, the NISO will be publishing a lot of information kind of with the buckets, and that's set out in the methodologies about all the information that we're publishing. Fundamentally, it'll be kind of making clear kind of how much space is left in each of the buckets. So I think while the EA register is something that we'll be publishing, the kind of limitations of that need to be recognised, i.e. that parties can tick do not have to be on that EA register, but the document that I think does look quite useful is the kind of the zonal summary information that NISO will be publishing.
Thanks, Will. That's a good point as well, because on our customer readiness declaration on the portal, there's an option at the end before you submit your final declaration, submit all the information to say, do you opt in to be on the EA register or not? And I guess once we've communicated to the customers, you will have your single point of contact, otherwise known as the SPOC, will be coming to the customers directly to telling them, their position in terms of this assessment. And then once it's all been done, connections reforms happened, and there is space within the queue, we will be communicating to our customers to apply, like we are at the minute for onshore wind, making sure that you're getting your applications in. Is that, I think it's me, Martin, next. So, Paul, I'm going to give this one, Paul, I'm going to send this I'm going to ask you this question. Are there going to be any sessions covering the strategic plans for areas covering new GSP and infrastructure, where connections can be managed by the queue process? If there is not enough grid capacity, etc., then there are new GSPs also being accelerated for a connection. Lack of visibility of viability of connections, strategic plans are frustrating third-party development.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, and it's where we on the Northern Powergrid DSO team are particularly interested in the Regional Insights team to learn about these points. This process really is about CP 2030 and getting generation connected before 2030. And most people on this call will know that you can't build a new GSP before 2030. And if you'd wanted to do that, you should have started a number of years ago. So the new demand and potential new GSPs is something which is definitely after 2030. And when we start to shuffle this queue down and we see what demand capacity we've got, then these webinars will start to talk much more about that. I think it's a great point, something we're aware of, something that we're dealing with. The answers are not there yet. We will be engaging with those demand interested customers about how we'll develop the network to satisfy those customers. But for now, this focus is really just about the generation projects, but we will get there. Stick with us. These webinars will move much more into what capacities we have available at different points, and what technologies would be looking for, and what demand would be sensible to be looked at. Obviously, there are commerciality issues, so we might need to do these more developer to Northern Powergrid meetings rather than broadcast. But the general themes will broadcast through these webinars. I'll leave it at that, Luke, but great question, and we're on with it.
Yeah, we're good. We're going to fit one more question in because we're a bit out of time before I hand back to Paul for some final thoughts. But Elliot, I'm going to ask you this question. What details of a detailed single diagram submitted as part of a new application can become fixed or mandatory?
Right. No, that's a good one. So I assume this comes from submitting a connection application to Northern Powergrid. So what you come in with is your G99 form, your single line diagram, which I'm assuming is what this is referring to. That single line diagram should show some initial plans, some detailed initial plans of what your installation is going to consist of. Yeah, the plans of that installation should show the technology, it should show what kind of equipment are on there, and obviously that should align with the G99 form. It is important to say that a single line diagram is just going to be plan data at that submission point, and it allow us to do a detailed analysis of what that impact is on our network. And obviously that can change within reason as your site would evolve as it goes through into development. Main things to look out for from your new application versus to what happens going into delivery. You want to keep a close eye on how you change your fault level and your install capacity, as those are sort of limits that we'd be looking to manage and put in place when we offer you that contract. So I hope that's give you some good information on that one. Cheers, Luke.
Thanks, everyone. That's some really good questions. Becca, over to yourself.
Great, thanks for that, Luke. So that is the end of the Q&A session there. We're almost at the end of the webinar. In a moment, I am just going to launch some polls to get your feedback on today's sessions. But before I do that, I'm just going to hand to Paul for some final thoughts. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Becca, and thanks everyone who's joined us this morning. You can see by the level of detail questions coming in that all you guys out there have got up to speed with the reform and really starting to work through what you need to do with us in order to check your projects and advance them. So that's really good news. I think I would say to you, look out for our communications coming in about the deep dives. It looks to me like the deep dives are going to be really important. I think that's the right solution. Thanks for you filling in the poll on the communications earlier. I think that's how it'll go, and if there are other deep dives needed, please get in touch with the team and we'll look to put those deep dives on there. I think that's the commitment I want to give you at the end. The key message has been that we've got everybody ready to go. We've got a team fully knowledgeable and ready to interact with all of the customers out there with their projects. We'll be working hard and communicating with you all the way through, and we are building and we're constructing projects right now, which is so important. So thanks everyone, and please stay around for the polls. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks for that, Paul. So I'm just launching the polls there now, so they should be on the screen in front of you. So there's just 5 quick questions to get some snappy feedback on what you thought of today's session, so we can look to continue to improve these webinars. Once you've completed the polls, feel free to drop off the session, and just thank you very much everyone for your participation today. Great to see so many questions. As I mentioned right at the top of the call, following the webinar, we will circulate the recording from today's session, the slide deck, and a summary of the Q&A as well. And we'll get back to any of you individually with any individual queries that were also raised. So yes, please do participate in those polls, and then feel free to drop off the call. And I hope you all have a great rest of the day. Thanks, everyone.